Night shifts, for some, they're just a job away to make ends meet. But for others, they're the doorway to an unsettling world where the lines between reality and nightmare blur. Tonight, we're diving into a true story that will make you question what really lurks in the dark. Turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin. Story number 1. Our story begins with Zoe, a 26-year-old single mother who had just started a night shift job at a 24-hour call center. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Zoe's job was simple: answer calls, troubleshoot, and try to stay awake. But there was one rule everyone followed: never, ever take the elevator alone after midnight. Zoe had heard the rumors from her co-workers' stories of strange occurrences in the building late at night. Phones ringing with no one on the other end, shadows moving in empty rooms, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. She brushed it all off as harmless office gossip. After all, it was an old building. Things creaked, lights flickered. No big deal. It was just past 2 a.m. when Zoe noticed something odd. She was working on a call when the line suddenly went silent. No static. No dial toned, nothing. Zoe hung up and immediately received another call, but this one was different. There was no customer, no voice, just the faint sound of breathing on the other end. Zoe hesitated, feeling the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She tried to speak, but no words came out. The breathing grew louder, more frantic, before abruptly cutting off. She dismissed it as a prank, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. By 3 a.m., Zoe was exhausted. Her head was pounding, and she needed a break. The coffee machine was on the ground floor, and the thought of walking down 4 flights of stairs was too much. So, against her better judgment, she approached the elevator, the one everyone warned her about. The ride down was unnervingly slow. The lights inside the elevator flickered, and Zoe felt a sudden drop in temperature. She hugged herself, shivering, and that's when she noticed the faint outline of a figure in the corner of the mirrored elevator walls. It was barely visible, more like a shadow than a person. Zoe's heart pounded as she turned around, but there was nothing there. She closed her eyes, telling herself she was just tired, that it was all in her head. But when she opened them, the shadow was closer, almost directly behind her. She stumbled out of the elevator, her breath shallow and quick. Zoe glanced back one last time, and that's when she saw it clearly this time. A pale face pressed against the mirror, eyes wide and hollow, staring directly at her. The doors closed before she could react, leaving her alone in the lobby. Zoe ran back to her desk, her mind racing. She tried to convince herself it was a trick of the light, a product of exhaustion. But deep down, she knew better. The calls continued, the strange breathing, the feeling of being watched, and Zoe never took the elevator again. Story number 2. Sarah was working the graveyard shift in the ICU, a shift she had worked countless times before. It was a slow night, with most of the patients stable and few calls from the nurses' station. The only problem, the East Wing, the oldest part of the hospital, was rumored to be haunted. Sarah didn't believe in ghosts. She'd heard the stories: patients seeing shadowy figures, nurses hearing voices calling their names, but she chalked it up to overworked imaginations. Tonight, she was assigned to do her rounds in the East Wing, alone. It was quiet to quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're not really alone. Sarah was checking the vitals of a sleeping patient when she heard faint whispers coming from room 409, a room that was supposed to be empty. She stopped, holding her breath, trying to catch any sound. It was a soft, muffled conversation, like two people were talking just out of earshot. She peeked into the room, expecting to find another nurse or maybe a wandering patient. But the room was dark and empty, the bed neatly made, the lights off. She flicked on the lights, but there was no one there, just the eerie feeling that she was being watched. Feeling uneasy, Sarah returned to the nurse's station and decided to check the surveillance footage, just in case. She rewound to the moment she had heard the whispers. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw an old woman in a hospital gown slowly shuffling down the hallway, her back bent, her hair disheveled. But what sent chills down Sarah's spine wasn't just the sight of the woman. It was the timestamp. The footage was from 10 minutes ago, but Sarah hadn't seen anyone pass her. She quickly scanned the cameras, but the old woman was nowhere to be found. She radioed security, but they found nothing. No sign of the woman, no sign of anyone at all. The East Wing was empty, and the security team's only response was, "It's just the wing acting up again." Sarah didn't know what that meant, but she was starting to feel that maybe those ghost stories were more than just rumors. Later, that night, Sarah reluctantly made her final round. As she passed room 409, she heard the whispers again, but this time, they were clearer. It was the old woman's voice, low and raspy, repeating the same phrase over and over. "Help me. Please help me." Sarah's pulse quickened, and she stepped into the room, turning on the light. The room was empty, but Sarah felt a cold breeze sweep through, making her shiver. As she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse in the corner of her eye a figure standing in the reflection of the window. The old woman was staring back at her, eyes hollow and dark, her mouth moving but no sound coming out. Sarah screamed, backing out of the room and nearly tripping over her feet. When she looked again, the figure was gone. The whispers had stopped, but the feeling of dread lingered. Sarah reported the incident, but no one believed her. They brushed it off as stress or fatigue, but Sarah knew what she saw. Sarah transferred to the day shift shortly after, refusing to ever work the night shift in the East Wing again. The old woman was never seen on the cameras again, but her whispers, those who work the night shift still hear them from time to time, echoing through the empty hallways. Working the night shift in a hospital can be eerie enough without the added mysteries of who or what might be roaming the halls after dark. If you ever find yourself working late, remember, not every call for help comes from the living. Story number 3. Night shifts can be long, quiet, and sometimes downright creepy, especially when you're alone in a place with a dark history. Tonight's story is about Daniel, a security guard working the night shift at an old, abandoned warehouse. But this wasn't just any warehouse. It was a place with a past that refused to stay buried. Turn off your lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into this true night shift horror story. Daniel was no stranger to the night shift. He'd worked security for years, usually in office buildings or shopping malls. But this new job was different. The warehouse was old, massive, and nearly falling apart. It was set for demolition in a few months, but until then, someone needed to keep an eye on it to deter squatters and vandals. It was an easy gig, just patrol the grounds every couple of hours and watch the security monitors. The warehouse was empty, or so he thought. From the moment Daniel started, he felt something was off. The place had a heaviness to it, a sense that something wasn't quite right. But he brushed it off. It was just an old building, right? On his third night, around 2:30 a.m., Daniel was watching the monitors when he saw movement. It was quick, just a blur in the corner of the screen, but enough to catch his attention. He rewound the footage and watched closely. A figure had darted past one of the cameras near the storage area, shadowy silhouette, human-shaped, but distorted. Daniel grabbed his flashlight and radio, thinking it was a trespasser. He headed toward the storage area, the echo of his footsteps bouncing off the empty walls. But when he got there, the place was deserted. No sign of anyone. He searched the entire area, checking every nook and cranny, but found nothing, just stacks of old crates and forgotten equipment. Daniel decided to chalk it up to his eyes playing tricks on him. But as he turned to head back, he heard it. Faint, almost melodic. Someone was whistling a tune, the kind you might hear an old man hum while lost in thought. It echoed off the walls, coming from somewhere deeper in the warehouse. Daniel called out, his voice sounding small and unsure against the vast emptiness, but there was no response. He followed the sound, cautiously turning corners, the whistling getting louder, more distorted. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence fell, and Daniel found himself standing in front of a locked door that led to the basement. He'd been told to avoid the basement. It was flooded, unsafe, and condemned. But now, staring at the rusted lock, Daniel felt an overwhelming urge to go inside, as if something was calling him. Against his better judgment, Daniel broke the lock and pushed the door open. The air inside was thick, damp, and carried the faint smell of something rotting. He descended the stairs, his flashlight flickering as he moved deeper into the basement. Water dripped from the ceiling, echoing in the vast, flooded space. As he reached the bottom, Daniel's flashlight caught something on the far wall, a message scrawled in red, barely visible through the mold and grime. It read, "I see you." Daniel's breath hitched, and as he turned, his flashlight illuminated the figure from the cameras, a man, old and gaunt, with hollow eyes and a twisted smile. But this time, it wasn't just on the screen. He was standing right there, only a few feet away. Daniel stumbled back, his flashlight slipping from his hands and plunging the basement into darkness. The whistling started again, now louder, all around him. He ran blindly, sloshing through the water, heart pounding as the whistling grew closer. More frantic, he burst through the basement door, slamming it shut behind him and locking it tight. Daniel quit that night, leaving the warehouse behind without looking back. The next guard took over, and the cycle continued. More sightings, more strange noises, and the constant, eerie whistling that never seemed to stop. The warehouse was eventually torn down, but those who were there say that the land still feels wrong, like it's waiting for someone to come back. Sometimes, a place can hold onto the things that happen there, the memories, the spirits, the regrets. So, if you ever find yourself working a night shift in an old, empty building, remember, you might not be as alone as you think.